Hello and welcome into another edition of New Track Record. Caleb Hatch with you from the WELT studios at the Allen County Public Library, and Justin Kinney from an undisclosed location in the American West. Justin, where are you at?
I am in Lead. It's spelled lead. That's one thing we learned here, that it is actually pronounced Lead. We're in Lead, South Dakota. Family got a lodge for a week, so you can see in Mount Rushmore and Crazy Horse, and we're about 5 minutes from Deadwood. So I'm on location this week, but ready to talk some IndyCar.
And plenty to discuss in IndyCar. We had, of course, the Chevrolet Detroit Grand Prix last weekend. We look ahead to Road America this weekend, and a ton of news. Team affiliations, TV, speculation, next TV contract, all to get to this week. So let's dive in, and of course we'll start recapping the Chevrolet Detroit Grand Prix. And it was a great weekend if you're Honda. It was a bad Indy 500 for Honda. It was a great Detroit for Honda. They get the top 4 positions with Scott Dixon getting the win, Marcus Ericsson second, Marcus Armstrong, his first career podium, in third, and Kyle Kirkwood in fourth, which, if I'm not mistaken, is his first top 5 finish that's not been a win in IndyCar.
Oh, really?
Which is, that's wild. I mean, if he's been in the top 5, he's won up until last weekend. So he's had a good start to the season. His worst finish is 11th. But all the focus on Scott Dixon. Of course, he gets the strategy right. We have a race that starts off dry, but there's some moisture, and then we get a little bit of rain, and then we have chaos, and then somehow Scott Dixon, of course, emerges unscathed and is able to hang on and hold off a charging Marcus Ericsson down the stretch to get his second win of the season. And for Scott Dixon, I mean, we can go in further on him, and I'm sure we will here, but it's not just about what he's done this season. It's that he continues to inch closer and closer on some pretty significant career milestones on where he stands, and it's just kind of hard to believe, right? I mean, you wrote him off, right?
Well, I didn't write him off. I just said he was prone to start making more mistakes at his age, and I'm still going to back that. I didn't say he was all of a sudden going to stop winning races, not competing for championships. You were just going to start seeing maybe his age more and more, but the guy continues to lay it down, had a good Indy 500, finished third, was there throughout the race and just didn't have it for both the McLarens and of course, Joseph Newgarden, and then comes back and wins Detroit. And as soon as you felt, okay, his strategy has caught him up front, just in true Scott Dixon style, you knew there wasn't going to be any more cautions after a caution
right.
First half of the race. So he gets the win, ascends to the top spot in the point standings, and the first to win multiple races this season, right? Well, no, Alex Palou has won 2, right?
Well, but Thermal doesn't.
I guess,
I don't count Thermal because it was not a points-paying race.
Yeah, so first to win multiple points-paying races, we'll say that for Scott Dixon, and it's an impressive drive, and just another. He almost cash it up to just Dixon being Dixon, and Mike Hall being Mike Hall at this point, and they got it right, and they get the dub.
And for Dixon, 58th career win, so he inches closer to AJ at 67. AJ Foyt on the all-time wins list. Also, 140th career podium. He's just 4 behind Mario all-time. More podiums than 22 drivers in the Detroit Grand Prix, drivers that have race starts. That from Trackside Online. Isn't that unbelievable?
Just very impressive. It's also very impressive, too, that we were reminded this as he made his, 100th Fast 6, I think, over the weekend. This is a guy that, outside of the Indianapolis 500, wins his last pole position.
Watkins Glen, 2016.
I was going to say 2016. I was like, that doesn't sound right. I thought maybe it was 2018. That's 8 years without a pole outside of the 500. It's just absolutely crazy, yet continues to win at the pace that he does.
Yeah. He's just so consistent, and he pounces when there's an opportunity. I think that's kind of the biggest thing. And again, fuel saving, right? He's able to save the fuel down the stretch that he needed to and make it work. And for Scott Dixon and for Honda, it was a huge weekend. And I guess let's start with our 3 things, and I will start with this. As much as people want to complain about this track layout, and visually on TV, it looks like a concrete canyon. Numerous journalists over the weekend were saying on social media and reporting, hey, it's a lot better in person. You have the Renaissance Center in the background. You have the Detroit River. Like, it's a cool setting. Grandstands were sold out. They were sold out, I think, the Thursday before the race. So second year in a row, it's sold out. So commercially, it's a success. In fact, Bud Dinker and other Penske Entertainment officials had very positive things to say about this track. We're of the fold that a chaos race or two is fine over the course of a season. And I think that's where this stands for me. It was entertaining. Was it great? I don't know. But it was entertaining.
Yeah, I so many people, you got to go back to Belle Isle and blah, blah, blah. And with Nashville Street Race gone, and who knows if it returns, that was our chaos race. And that's gone, at least temporarily. So I'm fine with another chaos race. And I go back to the reasoning, too, with the crashes like we did at Nashville. It is the majority of the issues were driver caused, either making stupid dive bomb moves into corners, trying to make moves. Some people say, well, there's only one true passing zone at turn 3. That's why. But to me, you can pass at Detroit. They said, even drivers before the race is a good course. You can pass here. It's not processional. I'll take a chaos race over a processional race any day of the week. And the people that calling back to go to Belle Isle, how soon you forget. You don't talk about processional races. A lot of the races were processional. There was hardly any fans. You had to be a diehard to go to Belle Isle because you had to bus onto the island. And there's just no feel at Belle Isle. It looks good on TV. That's about it. How soon we forget, I guess. It's I guess not surprising that people are reacting this way because the same people reacted to Nashville, but you and I are in the same line of thinking that we're perfectly fine with Detroit. Maybe not after Indy, but
yeah,
I'm perfectly fine with Detroit.
That's the key caveat there.
What's that?
I said that's the key caveat there. Not right after Indy.
Yeah, and I know Nathan Brown from the Indy Star was talking about, after your marquee event, you need something that, catches what race on the IndyCar schedule is an adequate follow to the Indianapolis 500? I don't think any race. Maybe you go to Milwaukee, maybe give it a break in Milwaukee, but it's easy to say those things, but you got to appease the tracks, you got to appease the promoters where they think that they can maximize their attendance and hype is where they're going to want the race. So I don't think you can start playing musical chairs with events because they need a quote-unquote really good event after Indy if it doesn't work for the track or the promoter.
Yeah, I think that's the reality. And a lot of drivers, we talked about fans. It wasn't just fans. I mean, you had numerous journalists that were wanting a return to Belle Isle. You had numerous drivers. You had Pato O'Ward saying, I miss Belle Isle. Well, he won at Belle Isle, so of course he's going to miss that track. Graham Rahal basically said, I second that as well. There were several drivers who even said as much. But, I mean, the reality is the event is a commercial success since moving away from Belle Isle. You don't have the run-in with, residents and parks department issues, that you have with Belle Isle. So yes, you're closing down city streets, but it's more of a showcase, and it's drawn bigger and better crowds and more commercial investment. Look, I get that you have to put a good racing product out there, but it's not just about the racing product. And after all, it is an entertainment business, plain and simple. Penske Entertainment.
Yeah. If it's a more successful event, not just better racing, you can argue whether it is or not. If it's a better event than what we saw at Belle Isle, then there should be zero consideration for a change, even if that was up there. And you mentioned a great point with the Parks Department. Like, they're not going back to Belle Isle. That's not working. That's not going to work. So maybe some adjustments to the layout I could see, but I like Detroit for what it is, and with the Rensen in the background, and I'm fine with it. All the emotions of Indy, and you go there, and then you're in a concrete canyon, so to speak, and running into each other, and you got shoving in the pits after practice. I mean, isn't that kind of what we wanted in IndyCar? Don't we want that drama? Don't we want that emotion? And what better place to bring that emotion out than Detroit? And we saw it.
Without a doubt. What's your number one?
Well, my number one was kind of Scott Dixon, and we kind of addressed him and talked about his race and led 35 laps, including the last, 32 in the final stint. And just a very impressive drive for Scott Dixon. And when we talk about the point standings, which we've opened that up, the last couple after post 500, you looked at Colton Herta there just 2 races ago was tops in the point standings. Now all of a sudden down in 7th, over 60 points now behind Scott Dixon. Talk about a dude that is absolutely dropped like a rock in 2 races. But how about the bounce backs too for drivers that struggled? Look at Felix Rosenquist, who had a really good Detroit, and Dixon, and you look at Will Power, they're bouncing back. So I think it was just a return to form for some drivers that maybe were short at Indy for whatever reason. Dixon, Power, etc. And Rossi, back-to-back really good finishes. So I think we're starting to see that points race come into focus. Right now, I would say it's a 3-horse race, but with plenty of races to go. Scott Dixon in the commander's seat going in to Road America this weekend. What's your number 2?
My number 2. So taking a look at everything that we saw over the weekend, let's talk about Team Penske. So obviously they had a great Indy 500. They swept front row for qualifying. Scott McLaughlin on the pole. Joseph Newgarden winning the race. Scott McLaughlin had he was 7th. Will Power didn't have a great Indy 500. But again, for the team overall, with everything that happened in the previous month, Tim Cindric now back with this on the timing stand for Joseph Newgarden. Everything returned to normal post push to pass gate controversy. And Penske's trying to downplay everything, whatever, but we've moved on. It's time to move on. I have my opinions on what happened. We don't need to continue to rehash it. But what we saw in Detroit was an absolute disaster for this team. You had Will Power seemingly penalized like 15 times. I know it wasn't that many. I think it was, what was it?
4.
4? It was 5 and 1 was rescinded. But he had
somehow still finished 6th.
Yeah, right. You had Scott McLaughlin simply just get into the tires because the track was getting wet. You have Joseph Newgarden had a fuel issue at one point, and then he took out Alex Palou in the hairpin turn. So I mean, it was a disastrous weekend for Team Penske, for Chevy, in Detroit, for GM. I mean, just not a good weekend. And I will say this, and I get this is probably getting ahead of things, but based on what we've seen, and because of the disqualifications at St. Pete for McLaughlin and Newgarden, in my opinion, they are finished from championship contention. And I understand there are a million ovals coming up. I understand that. But to me, they're so far back that it would take something drastic. Look, I think it's clear where we're at right now. Dixon or Palou will be the season-long champion. In fact, Road America, I saw a stat, I think it was IndyCar and NBC on Twitter had this. It was like the winner of Road America has won like 3 of the past 4 championships or something like that. So keep that in mind. But for this weekend, but to me, 2 Penske's are eliminated. Obviously, Power in third, he's very much in the thick of things. But I mean, you're more than a race points paying, win back, and they are definitely further back than that. You're in trouble. And to me, McLaughlin in 8th, Newgarden in 10th. Sunday was a disaster.
Well, Newgarden has an excuse with a disqualification. I think you look at Scott McLaughlin. I know he was dropped down to 27th at St. Pete, but 26th at Long Beach, 20th now at Detroit. He's not doing himself any favors. But I don't remember a race recently that saw Team Penske drivers make the amount of mistakes that we saw out of the 3 drivers last Sunday. Maybe there's other races that they finished worse or whatever, but in terms of driving, they were terrible on Sunday, all 3 of them. And the fact that Will Power was able to finish 6th is a miracle in itself, but just a pitiful follow-up from the 500 in which at least 2 had pace. Will Power had his issues and eventually crashed out. But, man, just a weekend to forget for Team Penske, and we'll see if they can regroup heading into Road America this weekend.
Well, the issue for McLaughlin is that he now has 3 finishes of 20th or worse. You're not going to win a championship like that. For Newgarden, he has 2 finishes of 20th or worse and 2 other finishes of 16th and 17th. And so that's not going to get it done. I mean, Alex Palou just had his worst result since Road America in 2022 when Marcus Ericsson took him out, like in the opening, what was that, opening lap or opening laps? So, I mean, it just goes to show you how important it is to have good results. You can win a championship having a few results mid-pack, but if you have multiple 20th place or worse finishes, to me, you're done in terms of competing for the championship. And look, we've seen him go on late season charges, talking about Newgarden winning, 3, 4, 5 races and cleaning up on the ovals, but it's just too big of a hill to climb. And we'll need to see Alex Palou win an oval race eventually here, especially as the second half of the season is primarily ovals once you get past Mid-Ohio. So that is a factor, but he's won 2 championships without winning an oval race before, so that's why I just think it's too far of a hill to climb.
No, I agree. The prime of the schedule in terms of Joseph Newgarden's sweet spot is coming up, as you mentioned, but he would have to just go on an epic run to climb back into this race, especially if he continues to lose ground at places like Road America and Laguna Seca coming up before we even get to all those ovals, Mid-Ohio as well, and that's going to be the great unknown is how is the championship affected by the hybrids. We've been vocal about saying it's dumb to have it adopted mid-season. We know why, because of the OEMs, but it is also going to throw a huge unknown into the championship race, and in a way it's going to be welcomed because it is just going to throw everything for a loop, and who handles it the best is probably going to come out the other side. But if you dug yourself too big of a hole before that, it's going to be difficult to get out, and I think Joseph Newgarden's there.
Absolutely. What's your number 2?
Well, let's talk Colton Herta. Put it on poll. You felt you and I exchanged messages. I don't know if it was Saturday or Sunday morning, an agreement that there is no way that Colton Herta is winning this race. I don't care where he's starting on track. Sure enough, not only didn't win it, but finished 19th, made a mistake on track, and just like he did at Indy. And I want to give Colton Herta the benefit of the doubt. He's still only 24 years old, but man, how many unforced errors can this guy make until we just start looking at him as a good driver that's not going to reach the next level? I know in a perfect world, if it would somehow happen and Andretti Global gets into Formula One, they want to put in Colton Herta in the car in one of them. And I'm looking at it going, what has Colton Herta done to deserve an F1 seat is kind of my thing. And once again, throwing away a potential win or a good result by mistakes on track. We saw it again at Detroit.
Yeah, and for Herta, I don't know if I said this to you or to another group message I send IndyCar related stuff to back and forth, but he feels like the new Paul Tracy, obviously not as brash. Okay, let's remove that. But in terms of having elite level talent, but then being inconsistent, it's very boom or bust, right? And the first half of the season, he was putting together good results and had that great rebound at the Indy GP. You felt like he had turned a corner, and then he throws away an elite car at the Indy 500. He gets a pole at Detroit and just stuffs it, trying to make a dumb move, right? And that chaotic, narrow area, it was not a smart move. And here we're at, and he's fallen back in the point standings. Yes, Road America he's very good at. He's won poles there. He's had success. But you got to be consistent. And Pato O'Ward, I mean, they came into the series at the same time. Pato O'Ward's figured out how to be a consistent championship contender. Yes, he still makes mistakes, and these are young drivers. We can't forget about that, right? They're two of the most talented drivers in the field, but they're also under 25. So that plays a role.
Yeah,
like, I think that's a significant role, but at some point, their experience, they need to turn the corner.
Yeah, I mean, this is the 6th year full-time season for Colton Herta in this series, okay? That's a lot of time. I know he's only 24, but still, he's been racing in this series for several years now and continues to make mistakes, really, really brash mistakes. And you could say the last 2 weeks, frustrations have boiled over in which he's thrown away potential better finishes. Remember, in Indy, has front wing damage, gets out of the car, should not have, sit there, get refired, go into the pits, replace your wing, you're a lap. At worst case, you're 2 laps down. Maybe you're a lap down and get a wave around at some point. So he throws away a potential better result last week due to frustrations. And then you mentioned the unnecessary move that took him out at Detroit. More frustrations. Being on the pole and being, filtered back and trying to make moves to get back up there and wrecks out. It just, for a guy that's been in this series for 6 years, you would expect more racing acumen, more mature moves and decisions. We're just not seeing that. And I'm at the point for a guy that now has started, how many races has he started? 88 races over 7 years, starting with that season finale with Harding. I guess I'm a guy that's he is kind of what he is, and you could say almost regressing. I mean, a guy that finished 3rd in the championship in 2020 and then went 5th the next year and then hasn't been higher than 7th since. 10th back-to-back years, the last 2 years. So Colton Herta trending in the right direction. If there's a guy that needs a very good Road America weekend, it's Colton Herta. But I'm just kind of looking at Colton Herta and I'm like, okay, this is his ceiling. And until he breaks through that ceiling and proves me wrong, I'm kind of looking at this guy as he's going to win a race here or there, but he's also going to make a fair amount of mistakes. And we saw that the last 2 weeks at Indy and Detroit.
No one's questioning his talent. He's definitely one of the fastest drivers in terms of his qualifying pace. No one's questioning any of these things. It's the consistency, and I'd like to think, and I hope, that he can get more consistent. I mean, Pato O'Ward's had this issue before, but again, Pato O'Ward, I have to correct myself, he just turned 25 last month. But they have 2 really good young up-and-coming drivers that people have had their eye on since they were in then Indy Lights. And it's in IndyCar's best interest for these guys to be stars, and part of it is the old guard is held on and done really well. The Dixons and the Powers have still been contenders for a lot longer than I think anyone would have imagined. And then you have Newgarden in his prime, you have McLaughlin coming up, you have Alex Palou, who came out of nowhere to be an elite driver. There's a lot of competition. But for Herta, and I'd throw an O'Ward into this, I mean, O'Ward is good enough to win a championship now, right? Colton needs to be more consistent before he can get to that level. And most importantly, both those guys, I mean, O'Ward has the win at St. Pete, but you got to win multiple races, and that's how you win championships. And we've not seen them really be able to do that this year.
No, you talk about one of the best to ever do it in Scott Dixon. He maximizes his opportunities on track or in the pits or wherever. Colton Herta does not maximize his opportunities. Starting on pole at Detroit, the chaos that could have been behind him, he just needs to stay out in front. He just didn't, got frustrated, made a bad move, and he goes from 1st to 7th in the standings in a matter of 2 weeks and over 60 points behind, or close to 60 points behind Scott Dixon in 2 weeks. And you just can't do that. And not in such a competitive series. I know it's cliche, but it's true, is you just can't have these swoons. If he can get back on track, Road America and Laguna Seca, maybe get a win, maybe that can right the ship. But the last 2 weeks have been absolutely brutal, and I guess further proves my opinion of Colton Herta as a good driver, but a guy that shoots himself in the foot way too much. And he's not going to last very long in Formula One if and when he gets there by driving the way he does in IndyCar.
Yeah, no, that's not going to work.
All right, what's your number 3? My
number 3. Man, this is where I don't really have some grand other takeaway on this. You know what? How could I forget? You had a lot of chaos between practice and the race with drivers. A lot of people want to blame the circuit, and I get that it's tight in parts, but there are other parts where there's passing zones. The drivers, I don't know what has changed, but the Indy 500, I mean, these guys were driving like maniacs, and Detroit was much worse. And at least in Detroit, there were penalties that were assessed, but either race control needs to do something to kind of curb what we're seeing, or this is just the new IndyCar and we just have to accept it.
Yeah, we continue to be in the no rhyme or reason, right, to what's a penalty, what's not. We talked last week about just immediately pulling out into the fast lane at Indy in the pits instead of starting out in the slow and merging into the fast, and that was never called, and it was just happened more and more as the race went on. And then you mentioned Detroit, and where were the penalties? At least there were penalties handed out at Indy, maybe not as many as we thought there should be, but then you get to Detroit, and it was just chaos again and not very much punishment, I guess. So really interesting. It's if you know the rhyme or reason to what IndyCar race control is thinking, let us know, because I don't think anybody truly knows. But here's the thing: is I keep coming back to you want passion, you want rivalries, you want heated discussions. You get it all at Detroit because of the nature of the circuit, and I think some of the energy, the high energy that people bring from Indy to Detroit, maybe their frustrations at Indy both internally and externally come out more, as opposed to when you're going 225 mile an hour around the speedway. And that's what we had. Kyle Kirkwood and Santino Ferrucci. You had Romain Grosjean going down to the pit of Santino Ferrucci. You had Colton Herta's comments before the race about Santino Ferrucci. I mean, these are the things that we want, and you get that at a course where there's not much room to beat and bang, and we got it. And then people want to complain. I kind of really don't understand it.
Yeah, and to be clear, I don't have an issue with like the penalties that were called at Detroit. Like I can't think of one that was like so bad of a call or that was missed. I mean, like Newgarden got a penalty, for what he did to Palou, and I was kind of wondering if they would. Will Power accused Max Pappas on the radio of being biased. I don't know if you caught that. But he was upset about one of the penalty calls. But, I mean, overall, I guess what IndyCar needs, either race control say, hey guys, like you got to get to the end of the race to even be competing here, and you're driving like fools, or is it that this is the way it is and that's what it's going to be moving forward? I guess I want to know, someone please ask, when it comes to officiating, is it just let them race, or is it we're going to keep a watchful eye and be very mindful of what guys are and aren't doing?
Yeah, or it depends on race to race and circuit to circuit. Who knows?
Yeah. What's your number 3?
Well, let's talk about Tristan Vautier real quick. A guy that had not been in an IndyCar race since 1982, felt like
2017, but yes.
But comes in, wheels it around, was never really a factor, but kept it clean. It started 24th, finished 18th. Just had maybe one or two offs over the course of the weekend, which everybody kind of did. But when we heard about this last week, we were like, okay, it's just the latest chapter in the coin saga of trying to find somebody that's bringing money. And Vautier brought some and got the ride. And for everybody that couldn't keep it clean over the course of the weekend, Tristan Vautier, who's out of a car since 2016?
17,
comes home with a respectable result in a non-crashed race car, which is always important, especially at coin, and did a great job. We know that Luca Giotto is back in the seat for this weekend and Laguna Seca, but it's an impressive drive for a guy that we haven't seen in quite some time in IndyCar.
Yeah, no, I think so. And the fact that he was up there toward the end of the race, and he said he didn't really have, I can't remember if he said he didn't have the tires or didn't really have the fuel to really fight to move forward. But it was a good weekend for him. He kept it clean. It was a respectable finish. And for Coyne, I mean, all you can do is just keep plugging away, right, with that other entry. I mean, that's all you can do at this point. And that's what they're doing. And they're making it work to the best of their abilities. That's all I can say, because it's kind of a mess from the get-go. And they keep finding drivers to plug in, and we'll see if Giotto can be good at Road America and at Laguna Seca. And then Nolan Siegel steps in for some of the ovals, so we'll have him coming up later this season.
Yeah, just battling for that leader circle money, top 22, get in right now. Both full-time Coyne entries are out of the top 22, but Vautier steps into that 51 car and brings it home to the best finish it's had all season. And so a really good shot in the arm for Coyne. I mean, in 17th and 18th overall for a weekend. If you continue to bring home 17th and 18th place finishes, you're probably going to at least have one of those cars finish in the leader circle. So tremendous job by Vautier stepping in, especially at the circuit he had to step in, and did a really, really good job for Coyne.
Those are our three things. Other takeaways from Detroit. We didn't even talk about Canapino and Pourchaire, which we'll get to a bit later on. Santino Ferrucci, with everything that happened, he got a 9th place finish. Some of it self-inflicted, to be clear. Made an inappropriate comment. It was heated, apologized. I don't think we need to overreact to everything there. He said something. He apologized. I know people want to question whether he means it or not. What did Marshall Pruitt, I think, have a story talking about, he was speaking with Kevin Lee off air about it, and, trying to figure things out in terms of, not just getting an apology, but, hey, I really screwed up here. I'm not here to question someone's apology, whether it's,
you could say for sure, but
I'm not here to question someone's apology, whether it was meaningful or not. That's not our place. And I think we can move forward, but
you mentioned it. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm just saying, I think we can move forward, past that. I think we need to discuss more on Pourchaire and Canapino, because there's another news item we'll get to on that. But for everything that happened, another solid finish for Ferrucci, and that's all you can ask for, right? He's done a good job. He's 12th in points, so that's all you can ask for.
Just a look. If you didn't like Santino Ferrucci coming into this season or coming into Detroit, chances are you still don't like him, and that's nothing you're going to change. And the big thing is he's fine with it. He doesn't care, and I think that's what endears himself the most to AJ. AJ didn't care what people thought, and he races the same way, similar to AJ. I'm not saying he has the talent of AJ Foyt, but I'm saying he races in a similar vein. What AJ, he doesn't care what people think, and he's going to rub people the wrong way. Again, here's a polarizing guy in the IndyCar series on track that people are, or some people want to say, well, why didn't AJ Foyt replace him? Why? Because he brings drama. He brings excitement. He brings controversy.
He also brings results.
People want it.
If he didn't bring results, he would have been replaced.
Absolutely. He's sitting, what'd you say, 12th in points as of right now?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if that held and he finishes 12th in the points, that's the best finish for a Foyt car in over a decade at least. I think Vitor Meira was 12th in 2010 as I quickly scan. I mean,
what about Sato in 13?
Sato in 13 finished 17th.
Okay.
In points.
And that's winning a race.
That was the year he won Long Beach. So it's been a long time since Foyt has had somebody this high up in the standings, this deep into the season. And even somebody better than 12th for Foyt, you have to go back, to Ayrton Dare in 2002 that finished 9th. I mean, what Santino Ferrucci is doing for Foyt so far this year, and granted over half of the season still remaining, but it's just absolutely phenomenal. And the fact that he rubs some or the majority of drivers and some fans the wrong way, I think is just a bonus. And like you mentioned, if he wasn't putting up the performances he is, he wouldn't keep that seat. But I don't think people quite understand just how big of a year this is for Ferrucci and Foyt if he can continue to hang around in the high teens there in the standings. It's absolutely huge. I welcome guys that are going to piss other drivers off in this series without crossing a line. You can argue whether he crossed the line with the comments he made. I think it's based largely on your age and demographic and stuff like that. But I think he is a great aspect of the series because of how polarizing he is. Again, I come back to fans, oh, these guys don't have personalities and we need rivalries, and then they're getting that with a guy, and they want to get rid of him. I don't understand fans sometimes, but I'm here for the Ferrucci show, man. I hope it continues in the Road America.
Now, that said, he's got to continue to get results, because if he continues to have run-ins with drivers and the results disappear, he won't have a ride with Foyt next year. I think that's the reality.
No, he will not, but at the same time, he was top 10 at St. Pete. He was 7th at Barber. He was a factor at the 500. He brought home a decent result, a good result at Detroit. So he's doing everything he needs to do. And when that other car, the 41, is so ineffective, it even props him up even more with what he's doing in the 14. And I've been nothing but impressed by Ferrucci, and everything ancillary to that is just a bonus, man. I love it.
Other things from Detroit: TV rating. Always a fun conversation. 608,000 on USA, and then you add in the other viewers from Peacock, and what a total, 681,000 viewers. So it's up 12% from the 23 IndyCar USA Network average. So that's good. The bad is last year was on NBC and it got 1.047 million or something like that. So that's the bad. Also, the bad is you're retaining just barely 10% of your Indy 500 audience, which was a record in and of itself. And in terms of how many people tuned in to the Indy 500 coverage, NBC touting across the board, it was over 13 million people, which was a new record for their Indy 500 coverage all across the board. But I think with everything on TV, yes, is this the ideal race to follow the Indy 500? No, of course it's not. But you have a commercially successful event. Penske gets his Detroit Chevy GM showcase, and that is surprisingly a good number for USA and IndyCar. I mean, that's just the reality. So I think when you look at it, yeah, it's not good, but it's better than what I expected going into the weekend. Let's just say that.
Yeah, it could have been worse. That's for sure. People clamoring for another race after Indy. Here's the big thing. It's a GM's home race, okay? Wherever and whenever GM wants to hold a race in IndyCar, you say, yes, sirs, yes, ma'am, okay? That's one of your two OEMs. You have to appease them. If they wanted to race the day out, talking tongue-in-cheek, if they wanted to race the day after the Indianapolis 500, you go, yes, yes. So what GM wants, GM is going to get, and for good reason. And it's not maybe the quote-unquote the ideal race after the 500. I would challenge, what is the ideal race after the 500? There's nothing that's going to match that event or even come close. So why even try? But I still, the frustrations for me for what being on USA is considerable, but it could have been worse. That's for sure. It's tough to look at things that way sometimes, saying, well, it could have been worse. But in this respect, it definitely could have been worse.
Much worse. And the numbers also stack up compared to other events. It was the fourth
most watched.
Yeah,
I think.
IndyCar cable race ever for NBC Sports. So that's USA, NBCSN, CNBC. Nashville, of course.
You could say partly that it did have momentum coming out of the 500. Not ideal, not being on network, sure, but fourth most viewed cable race since NBC had the series. I mean, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah, and again, another LPGA event. The the NBC is contractually obligated to run. So I mean, it puts it in perspective how good of a number this is, and also the Peacock number. I mean, that's really high. That's a lot higher than the 25, 30. I mean, the most we seemingly get is 50,000. Well, that's a lot more than 50,000. That was 73,000 on Peacock. So Peacock is really catching on as well.
Yeah, it definitely is, and it helps for sure. Is it enough to convince NBC and IndyCar to go and stay with NBC? We'll have to see. But I think the last 2 weeks have been encouraging for IndyCar ratings, especially the second race, not where we'd ideally like it, but could have been worse, a heck of a lot worse. And I think without the lead-in from the 500 the week before, that number could have easily been sub 500,000.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. All right, let's move forward to the other big topic of the episode. And news came out today, so we're recording this Thursday morning, June 6th. And it's that Arrow McLaren IndyCar team has terminated their strategic partnership with Juncos Hollinger Racing. Not a surprise. It was a commercial alliance. It was not like a technical alliance like we see, between Foyt and Penske, Meyer Shank and Andretti. Not like that. But there was a commercial aspect. Now, I don't know how much we saw really play out yet in terms of sponsors, being moved over. But this was a given after what happened. There were more death threats from Argentinian fans toward Teo Pourchaire. Didn't help that Agustin Canapino sent out a statement telling his fans to stop, and then at the same time was liking comments of people kind of joking about it on his Twitter, even liked a comment that said Callum Pourchaire. So, yeah, you're not really helping yourself with that. And the fact that Juncos just retweeted a McLaren statement saying there's no room for death threats, and they were not putting forth enough effort on their end to tamp down what was happening. And so this happening is not a surprise at all.
Right? Yeah, it's a consistent thing with Canapino and issues and Juncos' lack of response, as if kind of shrugging it off and, it'll go away if we don't recognize it, or if we don't call attention to it. There's really nothing you could do about crazies on social media saying this, that, and the other, but you can also have an appropriate response, and I think Juncos continues to not have the appropriate response when these things do happen, and I think it has cost them tremendously with the loss of McLaren. You have to think McLaren is the most well-funded team in the paddock. It is I would say, has the biggest host of sponsors on their cars and in their stable, and there was an opportunity for Juncos to see some of that bleed over and see some of those sponsors put on their cars. And how much money is that bringing into Juncos Hollinger? And that's gone. And I think this is now really putting the focus on Ricardo Juncos is what are you going to – you really need to start taking this seriously. You're not going to put a stop to it, but the response that you can make needs to be better. And it hasn't been in each of the instances we've had. And now it's really hurting Juncos where it matters, in the wallet, with McLaren making the decision it did.
And Juncos eventually did put out a statement, but, I mean, it took a while. You need to condemn this stuff pretty quickly. And it never seemed to be that they were doing anything about it quickly until they kind of had their hand forced. McLaren put out a statement. IndyCar put out a statement. Juncos, I believe, then put out a statement. So this is not a surprise, and you just kind of wonder, what does this impact? How does it impact the team the rest of the season and in the future? I'm sure it will have some impact.
I know that Ricardo Juncos is a tough spot with being an Argentinian, and a fair amount of his sponsors and supporters from Argentina and all that stuff. But dude, you have to show better in terms of responding to this stuff. Again, it's not going to stop it, but you can condemn it and really be out in front of it, be the first to address it, not more reactionary because people are like, well, is Juncos going to release anything or going to say anything? And then they almost do because of pressure put upon them. That's how it looks, at least outwardly. So it's unfortunate. It's a part of sports and crazies online and social media, but I think everybody can agree that Juncos Hollinger's response to each of these incidents, of which there have been multiple now, has been absolutely terrible.
Yeah, it's been lacking in terms of the urgency and the condemnation of what's happening. You got to do a better job with all of that, and they're simply just not doing a good enough job. So we'll see, but I'm sure there will be an impact moving forward. If you agree or disagree with us, we'd love for you to interact with us. You can always find us online, newtrackrecordpodcast.com. While you're there, you can sign up for the email list. It is free to subscribe. We'll send out emails for new episodes and any special announcements. You can also check out the store. We have T-shirts and stickers for you to take a look at. You can follow us on social media, IndyCar Podcast on Instagram, on Twitter /X, on Facebook. Just search for New Track Record. Our email address, newtrackrepodpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. Thanks to Xavier and others for their support. And you can always listen in if you're in the Fort Wayne area on 95.7 WELT on Saturday mornings from 8 to 9 a.m. And you can listen in to the full episode via podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, which we're back, got that issue fixed earlier this week. So if you missed last week's episode and listen via Spotify, you can catch our Indy 500 recap now on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Overcast, CastBox, Player FM, basically wherever you find your podcasts, you can listen in on your favorite podcasting platform and download for free. Okay, Justin, mailbag time, and we have a ton to get to because, of course, a lot of people have opinions about a lot of things, and rightfully so. It was a very chaotic last week. So let's start. And a lot of people talking about Detroit. So let's start with that. This from Snarky Moose, S2000_Moose. About Detroit, could you run it backward? That way turn 3 is no longer a dive bomb zone and turn 2 becomes the passing zone. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah. I'd have to look more at the track and think about it, but could be something. Thought to look at, maybe.
It's an idea. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm open to ideas. And I don't think they're going to change anything, but I mean, I don't know if I think it's more so on the drivers than it's on the track, personally.
Yeah.
And it's on race control to police things and just figure it out. Other comments on the crashes and drivers, IndyCar saying it's as much on the drivers as it is the layout of the course. It's concrete canyon, barely wide enough for 2 cars to go side by side. It's a joke of a course that's fit for go-karts. And I know you said this in the reply, but we would take the Detroit GP over the Indy GP. Sans rain. Now, if there's rain, I'm interested.
Yeah, it makes Indy GP. Take the Indianapolis Motor Speedway out of it, and people would be condemning the Indy GP about how boring it is. I think having it at Indy raises it to a level that people just accept it and love it. If you're just judging the event purely on the excitement of the race, the Indy GP isn't there. It lacks a lot of excitement unless there's rain.
And that's the thing. Other comments on Detroit, and we had plenty to get to. Dopozo Rodrigo, maybe shorter yellows. Yeah, race control. They had to work with the blend line and reordering multiple times on cautions. 47% of the race run under yellow. That's not ideal.
Not ideal, no.
Aaron,
how much of that you're putting on the course? How much are you putting on the drivers in the series?
Correct. Aaron J. Richmond, as a longtime fan, the crashes and fighting were entertaining. This is, at the end of the day, an entertainment product. since this is effectively a spec series and the cars/tech aren't amazing. The on-track product and off-track drama are what's needed to make it entertaining. Yes. Ben Smith for real said disagree. That street course talking about Detroit is crap. If IndyCar insists on racing there, move it down the schedule, take a week off after Indy, make the next race the Milwaukee Mile. I'd be fine with going to Milwaukee the week after, but they did that for years, got away from it, and I don't know if you can get the crowds back. We'll see this year if that's a possibility.
And again, sounds good, but what does the promoter want? What does the track want? Do they want to be the race after the Indianapolis 500 now? Just because they used to be doesn't mean they still want to be. So it's so easy to say, similar to when we get, like, why does an IndyCar race here, there, this, that, and the other? It takes two to tango. Same thing with your scheduling. Why don't they put this race here and there? Well, because maybe the promoter and the track don't want it there.
Yeah, it's always up to a lot of factors, not just, how's the racing product. Other comments, Turn 4 Podcast 1 said, cool temps, hard tires in anticipation of hybrid, one super juicy passing zone, what could go wrong? Yeah. P. Gaynor 14 said, I love Belle Isle. I attended in 2022, so I could experience it before it was gone. And John_Racer 500 said, it would be a great race if there were a virtual safety car like F1. It would solve a lot of problems to get back to green faster. Yeah.
He's not wrong.
Not wrong. That is correct. So, I don't know. It's a fine line between entertaining and ridiculous, and the race on Sunday had a little bit of both. Actually, I'd say a lot of both.
Well, you said it may not have been a good race, let alone a great race, but it was an entertaining race, and I would take entertaining over dull and processional any day of the week. Correct.
A lot of replies on you posted this, USA Network, terrible TV option for IndyCar and better be part of the consideration when choosing between Fox and NBC, FS1, greater than USA. I mean, yeah, it's a sports channel. You're going to get sports fans. For IndyCar saying, honest question, doesn't Fox's race coverage kind of suck? Missing key components during the race, poorly timed cautions, etc. I mean, you could say NBC has the same issues. So, I don't know. It is what it is.
Yeah, how many green flag restarts have we missed over the years from NBC? I mean, they're not perfect.
Tudor Indy saying definitely not the right place for the first race after Indy. Lynn_IndyCar said NASCAR has decent numbers on USA Network, of course, not as good as NBC, but 608,000 is a lot better than Long Beach by more than 1.5 times, so perspective. Mo44 President said ESPN greater than both. Pitt and Paddock Pod said, I think Fox would have to use a different crew for IndyCar since the NASCAR crew would be busy up until the 500. So that could solve some issues. Fox wouldn't have both series run at the same time. Downside, no fairly cheap streaming service to access everything without cable. Yeah, that Venue Sports option, though, that's going to launch this fall would be, and it's not cheap, though. That's the thing. Could be $30, $40, $50 a month. But that gets Fox, ESPN networks. It gets, what else?
Like ABC, you get NBC.
Yeah.
Fox Sports.
Turner Sports, all those channels. So there are a lot of options there. Yeah, you basically the NCAA tournament, everything on ESPN, everything on Fox. So that would include Big Ten Network, FS1, FS2, NBC. Not part of that because they just have
Versus.
Peacock,
maybe not Versus.
Outdoor Life Network.
If you know, you know.
We could go on and on and on. Elsewhere on the mailbag this week, we had a lot of people commenting because, well, Roger Penske just seemingly can't stop talking about the push to pass controversy. And we're only still talking about it because he's still talking about it. Penske said sometimes
keep asking him questions about
when there's blood in the water, people like to go after you, and I think that's what happened. I'm fine. I mean, we moved on. The controversy, as far as I'm concerned, was way overblown. You posted, was it overblown? No. Are most of us ready to move on? Absolutely. I hope this is the last we talk about it, but we got a lot of comments on it. First, from DC Soda, incredible thing to say when you own the series and have every single scrap of power in the situation. Becoming more and more clear he should have to sell the team if he wants to keep the series. Tyler_Allen said, had it been any other team, I don't think it would have blown up quite as much, but it was the team of the owner of the series, really bad optics. Unlimited Slip DF said, the engines were most certainly overblown. I'll see myself out. Mike Joachim said, it feels like the team is the least ready to move on because they keep bringing it up. Correct. That is spot on.
Right.
Lynn_IndyCar said, way overblown by certain media members. IndyCar did an investigation. Only found St. Pete is the issue. Media members were posting in-car cameras trying to infer this happened sooner because of certain driver habits. Yeah, that was debunked. Leonard PDX said, nah, I'm still going to enjoy calling Newgarden a cheater for a while longer. And
that's your right, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Getch20 said apparently they used push-to-pass for 11.9 seconds when it wasn't permitted. In one race, 2 cars. Could have been in 3 cars going back to 23. And they never once used it. It was an error, but it looked really bad because they got first and third, and their owner owns the series. Overblown. Again, people agree, people disagree. But with that, I think we can move past that incident, finally.
You can agree. You can disagree on how it happened, whether Team Penske intentionally or unintentionally did it. You can disagree or agree with how Roger Penske has handled it. But in both of our opinions, it's over with. You're not going to continue to harp on it. It happened. You can agree or disagree based on how it was handled, but we're ready to move on. And plenty of people are. I think some media members are not, and that's why Penske continues to get hit with questions about it.
Yeah. A couple other mailbag notes. This from Lynn_IndyCar. Another amazing drive from Herta. Isn't he the highest paid driver?
Yeah,
we believe he is.
And he's the dude banking money for a prospective F1 ride. But why is Romain Grosjean out of F1? Crashed too much. Is Colton Herta that much different than Romain Grosjean right now in that respect? Crashing too much. He's in an advantageous position because his owner loves him. His dad is part of the team, a big part of the team. But how much longer does Colton Herta get a pass from people? He's 24 years old. Yeah, you can still say that's young. He's been in the series full-time for 6 years and has 7 wins, but probably could have double that without his mistakes and the mistakes of the team.
Yeah. That wraps up the mailbag news and notes, and we start with, I think, the biggest other story item in the last week, and it's more updates and rumors on IndyCar's future TV deal. So the first thing that came down was from Marshall Pruitt in this week's Racer.com mailbag, and he had this to say. He said, I've had 2 significant figures in the IndyCar paddock and one big name outside of IndyCar tell me NBC has offered to place all races on network in a new deal. They said Penske hasn't jumped at the opportunity and is continuing to fish for the biggest payout. I've also heard from multiple sources that heading out of Detroit, the prevailing belief is we'll be setting our DVRs for Fox, Fox Sports 1, and maybe even Fox Sports 2 next year and beyond to watch IndyCar racing. I've heard NASCAR and Fox veteran Adam Alexander is a strong candidate to lead the broadcast. Related, Fox just informed about 150 Fox Sports employees in Charlotte, North Carolina. They'll be out of work at the end of the month. Not sure how those 2 items reconcile. So the last part, I'm not sure, because remember, Fox next year, they won't have the Coke 600, right? That's the Amazon package, I think, around that time, or TNT. I think it's Amazon takes over. So they obviously have space and want the inventory, and they want a motorsports property. That's why they're going after it, because they could have a marquee event once again on Memorial Day weekend. There are a lot of thoughts on the NBC's offered an all-network package, but IndyCar hasn't taken it. One, if Fox is truly offering, say, double the money, say they're offering 40, 45, 50 million, and NBC's offering like in the similar range that they offer now at 20 to 25. That's a really tough decision, right? I mean, you talk about short-term gain in terms of a huge money boost that helps teams, and maybe you increase leader circle payments. On the other hand, you're obviously going to get better TV ratings if it's all NBC, and then the flip side is the Fox package is like, 1 or 2 races on FS2, the rest on FS1, and then like 5 or 6 on Big Fox. I mean, that's tough to say that, yes, double the money is worth it, because also, I mean, you have to be careful with providing access. And if the all NBC deal is date equity and it's on NBC and the money is decent, I think you have to take it. But there's so many unknowns in this that it's hard to decipher what's the best option. We don't know.
Yeah, it's easy for people to say, "Oh my gosh, NBC's offering every race on network. How could you not just sign that deal right now?" But you don't have to look any further than last week to kind of understand the problem with that, because the reason why Detroit had to be on USA and why the 500, if it was rained out on Sunday, was going to be on USA on Monday is because other contractual obligations to other sports. Tennis, in the case of the Indianapolis 500 over Memorial Day weekend, and the LPGA Tour this past weekend. And those aren't going away from NBC, which tells me that NBC has offered to have every race on NBC with the caveat that certain races have to be on different days or different weekends. And that's not going to fly with some of these tracks, the majority of the tracks. If you told Long Beach, yeah, starting next year we can have you on NBC, but you're going to have to move your date up 2 weeks or something like that. And Long Beach is like, no, we're not doing that. So that's the thing, is it's easy to say, well, of course you need to sign for with NBC because every race is going to be on network. No, not if it involves wholesale changes to the schedule to the detriment of the tracks and the promoters. You can't do that, because without successful events, you don't have races so you don't have anything to broadcast anyway, regardless of where it's at. So, as you mentioned, so many unknowns with all this. If the Fox deal includes more money and qualifying on FS1 and some FS2, maybe practices are on FS2, that's a home run in my opinion. But it's easy to say it's a no-brainer to stay with NBC based on what we know, but it's impossible to say that NBC has offered, let's say, this same schedule next year in every race on big NBC, because contractually that would be impossible unless there were wholesale changes to the schedule. Could you have Saturday races, right? Races moving around just to accommodate NBC. I just don't think you can do that and not compromise the health of some of your events.
Yeah, and again, it's like, how many races on Fox are we talking about? If it's 5 or 6, that's probably not good enough. If it's half, that makes it a tough decision. So we don't have enough information, and it sounds like with where things are, we're not going to get an answer this week. There was a possibility we could get it by the Indy 500. Obviously, that didn't happen. Adam Stern, Sports Business Journal, saying the latest is Fox Sports remains in advanced talks with IndyCar over picking up media rights next year, per People Familiar, but the racing series has said recently that the incumbent NBC Sports still in the hunt. No announcement on the decision expected this week. So that's where we stand. I'm not sure, but it just comes down to what's providing the most money, but also the most value for IndyCar beyond money, but in terms of, network races. And if the NBC deal has the date equity, and if the money's close-ish, yeah, you take it. Of course you take it. But I think the reason why it's a harder decision, why we don't have a decision yet, is because the money probably isn't close, and Fox is offering a lot more. So that's what is making this play out longer. Hopefully we'll have an answer by the end of the month. I have no idea. They've said, we want to get it wrapped up earlier, and then I think, at this rate, it wouldn't shock me if it's the end of the season that they announce this. Who knows?
I think one thing is for sure is if this would have been announced earlier if there was a perfect option where everything on IndyCar's wish list was checkmarked, either from NBC or Fox. The fact that we don't have a deal tells me that neither offers checkmark every single thing that IndyCar is going for. Now I think IndyCar has come back around and say, okay, we need to prioritize what our goals are with the next TV deal and who has the better deal in terms of how many check marks it has and what we deem is important. So I think that's where IndyCar is right now, evaluating, but neither offer has been an absolute home run. If it was, this would have already been announced.
If you're IndyCar and say Fox offers 8, 9, 10 races on network, they put every practice and qualifying session on FS1 or FS2. You get Indy 500 qualifying, some of it on Fox. And every Indy Lights, as we still call it, race on FS1 or FS2. That's good exposure. That's better than what you were getting currently.
That is a no-brainer.
And with NBC, yeah, all the races on network, but if everything else between qualifying and practices and Indy Lights being on Peacock, in a way, that's kind of a step down, right? I mean, I get you're not getting qualifying and practice on TV outside the Indy 500 qualifying as it is, but I don't know if that's good enough, let alone the date equity. That's the issue. You're not moving Long Beach around. You're not moving St. Pete around by more than a week or two.
Right.
You don't want to keep moving dates because then that's where races get doomed is by not having date equity.
That's one thing we can say IndyCar has done a good job of the last several years is date equity. And for the most part, the majority of the current races are relatively healthy. I don't think there's one this year that we're looking at and say definitely gone after this year and this happens. I think you can look at Gateway as, okay, kind of concerning and Toronto kind of concerning, but nothing that you feel is imminent. I don't think we feel like it was Texas last year where you're like, all right, this is going to be the end for the foreseeable future. And part of that reason is because of date equity and making sure the tracks are having their race at the most opportune time for them. If you start trying to accommodate NBC for network and moving those around, you're going to put some events in some compromising positions and could impact the future of those events.
Yeah. Moving on to silly season. So Joseph Newgarden, no surprise that it was told they were close, and then they announced over the weekend in Detroit that he had reached a multi-year contract extension. That was expected. That was going to happen eventually. So he's with Penske 2025 and beyond. Again, multi-year deal. Penske doesn't ever release anything on figures, but obviously I'm sure he's getting paid more, you would think, after being a back-to-back Indy 500 winner. Arrow McLaren, the latest Racer.com, Marshall Pruitt, sounds like Pato, of course, already signed his deal. Rossi sounds like they're working to bring him back, and they could also bring in Teo Pourchaire back as well. My guess is it's between Pourchaire and Callum Ilott moving forward. It really just kind of depends on who Prima goes after, right? I think that's kind of the deciding factor, but Arrow McLaren could return all three. We shall see. And then you have Tom Blomqvist in that situation. He's out at Road America. Mari Snyder, shout out to Hickey93, said on the broadcast that Tom Blomqvist out for the year. That's not a surprise. They did the move for Leader Circle. They admitted as much. Not that, Elio getting taken out by Santino Ferrucci helped at all in the Leader Circle. In fact, they dropped out. But my guess would be David Malukas, once he's healthy, if that's by Mid-Ohio, steps into that seat for the rest of the year.
Yeah, our thing, with Elio is, does he really give you that much of a boost consistently at tracks that IndyCar goes to help that car? It was a non-factor at Detroit even before getting taken out. But, yeah, I know the team said, well, it's for Leader Circle reasons. I think there's more to it. I think that Tom Blomqvist just was uncomfortable in an IndyCar. I think that had a lot to do with it, especially at Indy. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the reasoning. Is Tom was just like, this is not for me, and that's okay. But we'll see. But coming back to silly season, just kind of already setting up to be. Usually, our silliest silly seasons are when we have the trickle down effect, right? When we have drivers go from a mid-level to a top team, and then the mid-levels are rating the low levels, and the low levels are rating, F2 and lights and stuff like that. We know that Penske is set for next year with their three. It sounds like McLaren is happy with their three, with Callum Ilott as that kind of wild card. You look at Ganassi and you're like, okay, if anything, they're going to shrink. Do they run 5 cars next year? Who knows? But nothing is imminent in terms of changes in that stable, I don't think, except maybe a surprise retirement from Scott Dixon. And then you have Andretti. So in terms of the top teams, I don't see a lot of movement right now. So
I mean, Christian Lundgaard's the other wild card at Rahal, but Marshall Pruitt saying in the mailbag this week sounds like he's probably going to return to Rahal. Look, the only way he leaves Rahal is if a McLaren seat becomes available, but I don't think that's. I don't know if that's going to happen.
With both Lundgaard and VK as kind of those guys that, could they get a lucrative deal to jump up one of the top 4 teams? The fact that neither one of them seemingly have the interest tells me that there's going to be a lot of stability with the top teams from 24 to 25. So in terms of silly season, maybe there's some stuff with the mid to low level teams, and of course you mentioned Prima, but with if you look at the top 4, barring something crazy happening, and there's plenty of time between now and next year at St. Pete for crazy things to happen. But right now it just looks like status quo for a lot of those top 4 teams.
Yeah, it does seem like that. Another note, Joseph Newgarden did say, this from Bob Pockris, who covers NASCAR, that he wants to do the double as well, and he hopes that Kyle Larson does it again, which I still think he will. I'm not buying into all the hype with that. I think that's a NASCAR-generated thing. Also, top markets for the Indy 500. Obviously, Indy number 1. Would you guess number 2?
I will say Charlotte.
No. Dayton, Ohio was number 2. Milwaukee, number 3. Knoxville, Tennessee, number 4. Louisville, number 5. Cincinnati, 6. Fort Myers, Naples, number 7. Greenville, Spartanburg, South Carolina, number 8. Columbus, Ohio, number 9. Tulsa, Oklahoma, number 10. Your top 10 TV markets for the Indy 500 per Adam Stern. And
very interesting.
Yeah, a couple other notes. ABC Supply and Foyt raised $5.2 million for the Homes for Our Troops campaign for the Indy 500. So outstanding stuff there. Bud Dinker, Penske Entertainment, says that Penske Entertainment is open to promoting more IndyCar races if they are in new markets. So
okay.
What does a new market mean?
Maybe a street race in Denver?
Yeah, maybe. Is Michigan International Speedway a new market?
You're pushing that.
Yeah, it's not happening. Let's see. What else do we have? Oh, Honda has a new simulator. Honda Racing US has a new simulator in Indianapolis. So that will help the drivers in IndyCar, no doubt. And I think we just have a couple other notes here. Just one other main note, and unfortunately one of the all-time greats in IndyCar and racing in general passed away earlier this week. Parnelli Jones died at the age of 90. Just an exceptional racer in whatever he did. Also was a team owner as well. But 90 years old, died of natural causes in California, where he had lived since he was 7 years old. He is just one of the greats, and again, before our time, but he accomplished so much in his career. It's not just IndyCar. I think that's kind of the focus because he won the 1963 Indy 500 and should have won more. But he did so many things, whether it was off-road racing, whether it was with a team as a team owner, in NASCAR. He won the Baja 1000 twice. Won multiple USAC championships. I mean, this was one of the all-time greats in racing.
Yeah, definitely was, and a guy that really was a racer's racer. The old school guys that would just race anything, anywhere, anytime, and a great ambassador for auto racing over the years. And Robin Miller was a big proponent of Parnelli and pushing him to get the recognition he deserved, which I think came a lot in the last decade of his life. I think there was he did what he did, and then he kind of fell off and was forgotten a little bit, and then it resurgence the last decade or so. But 90 years old, we should all be so lucky. Just a great guy, great racer, another of the old school guard that are gone, but will surely not be forgotten, Mr. Parnelli Jones.
No, absolutely not. All right, let's do a quick preview of Road America coming up this weekend. We have practice 1 for IndyCar and all the usual outlets. Peacock, IndyCar Live, SiriusXM, IndyCar Radio, 4 to 5:15 all times Eastern on Friday. Practice 2, 11:10 to 12:10 on Saturday, starting in the morning, wrapping up early afternoon. Qualifying 3:25 to 4:55 Eastern. The warm-up 12:15 to 12:45 on Sunday morning. And then the race 3:30 to 6 on NBC and Peacock. So 55 laps. It always throws me off, but it's a long course, right? I mean, it's a 4-mile course, so it's a long lap. What's your prediction for this weekend?
I'm going to go a guy that's had a lot of success here. Outside of a 27th place finish due to crash in 2022, has never finished worse than 7th in his starts at Road America, including 2 wins over the last 3 years. I'm going to go Alex Palou wins at Road America.
I'm going to go Joseph Newgarden. I think he's going to bounce back and get the win post-Detroit. Our 3 key stats from Chad 200 for Road America. Newgarden, 2 wins, 3 poles, 5 podiums, 149 laps led. No one's led more than 70. That's since IndyCar returned in 2016. Graham Rahal, 2 podiums, 9 top 11 finishes. Colton Herta, 2 poles, 4 front row starts, but he's finished 8th, 5th, 5th, 2nd, 5th, and 5th. So yeah, Colton Herta top 5 sounds pretty good, but not when you have multiple poles and 4 front row starts.
Hasn't been able to maximize his opportunities. On his 2 races in which he started pole, 2019, finished 8th, and then last year finished 5th. Not maximizing your opportunities.
Our tweets of the week, and we'll go through these pretty quick here. This from Steve Wittich. Headline for today's race: Delora wins big in Detroit. Nathan Brown of the Indy Star. Detroit Grand Prix. Catch the pun. Marshall Pruitt. These bleeps sure love running into each other. And then this from Morgan Holidays. So Indy 44 posted Grosjean furious with Santino, letting Larry Foyt know about it. That was after a practice session. Morgan Holiday posting, he went straight to the manager. I have to respect his Karen energy. Going right to Larry Foyt.
Yes.
All right. Random split air driver of the week time.
All right, we're going to CART. The fertile ground that is CART continues to give us a lot of guys going with a dude that made just 1 appearance in 2004 for Walker Racing, Mr. David Besnard.
Who?
A championship driver in supercars, won a pair of championships a pair of wins in supercars, over 158 races, but was called in by Walker Racing in 2004 to start at Surfers Paradise. He was able to get that ride with his relationship with people through supercars. His finish of 7th is still the highest finish for an Australian at that event, not counting
2008.
Brian Briscoe's win in 2008 for IRL. He has been racing in New Zealand touring cars for several years after his one and done. Actually did some Atlantics racing for Hilton Motorsports, never heard of him, in 1999, ran out of money halfway through the season and was replaced. Had a 7th at Long Beach, 7th at Montreal. But this was a guy that basically did his home race, was a guy from Sydney, Australia, did Surfers Paradise in 2004, and that was it. One and done in the CART series. So this week's Random Splitter Driver of the Week, Mr. David Besnard.
All right, we will be back next week for a recap of Road America. For Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. This has been New Track Record Podcast.